This was my first question to Mayor Johnson earlier this week. Let's start with a yes or no question. Is it proper to negotiate a CTU contract if, as a member on leave, you are going to benefit from that contract?
Well, I'm not going to benefit from the contract.
So this is Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, and right there he was being pressed by a local news reporter on whether or not it is proper for him, a member of the Chicago Teachers Union that is on leave, that is not resigned, to negotiate a contract with said Chicago Teachers Union if as soon as he gets out of office, he can just return from his leave of absence and benefit from said contract. And Brandon Johnson decides that he's going to lie right to the face of Chicagoans by saying, no, I'm not going to benefit from that contract. Pay no attention to the fact that I'm still a member of the Chicago Teachers Union, negotiating allegedly against the Chicago Teachers Union because I'm such a great and solid ethical guy. And this is a ridiculousness on top of a ridiculousness, but it gets even worse because Brandon Johnson claims that he was cleared by an ethics board, only for us to discover that he never even sought advice from the ethics board. Now, we gotta break this whole thing down, but before we do, I want to remind you that friend of the channel, Devin Tracy, he is raising money for his parents' home, which was lost in the California wildfires. If you're a fan of Devin, aka AIU on the internet.com, or a fan of mine and you want to support him, the link will be in the top of the description. If you can't afford to do so, or you just don't like Devin for whatever reason, so you don't want to give him a dime, I understand, that's totally fine. I'm just trying to advocate for my friend. But without further ado, let us get into this latest debacle going on in the city of Chicago.
The controversy over Mayor Brandon Johnson's status with the Chicago Teachers Union has taken a new turn. Ethical questions persist about the mayor's role in ongoing CTU contract talks. And now the city's Board of Ethics is weighing in, denying that their office ever advised the mayor on the issue.
So this right here is basically the heart of the issue going on in the city of Chicago. Mayor Brandon Johnson is a member of the Chicago Teachers Union. He is currently negotiating a contract with the Chicago Teachers Union. However, rather than resigning when he became mayor, he decided to go on leave, so he might be a beneficiary of the contract, which, by the way, he's already trying to force very generous terms to the Teachers Union that he is negotiating. Of course, Brandon Johnson denies that there's an ethical violation, claims that he consulted with an ethics board. However, when they asked people at the ethics board, they said, no, that's not the case, just like I told you out in the open. But it actually gets significantly worse, especially if you recall the videos that we covered on this previously and how disastrous he's trying to make the financial situation in Chicago in order to benefit this constituency.
Officially, he has not resigned from CTU.
So I am on leave from Chicago Public Schools, but I'm not negotiating a contract. The Board of Education has that responsibility.
But with elected school board members joining next week, the mayor still appoints the majority of the school board.
So this is what Brandon Johnson feels like is his shield against any criticisms of ethics violations and whatnot, and that is the fact that supposedly the Chicago Board of Education is the one who's negotiating the contract with the teachers union, not him. However, the local news accurately reveals that even though they added elected members to this board, it turns out that the majority of the board is still appointed by Brandon Johnson himself. And if you guys will recall, and I referenced this a little bit earlier, we actually did a video on him firing or forcing to resign every single member of this board due to the fact that they failed to approve a high-interest short-term loan because that loan was obviously going to hurt the city of Chicago, but he wanted that loan in order to give the Chicago Teachers Union about a 9% raise. Of course, this is despite the fact that Chicago public schools are failing, but Brandon Johnson has already shown authoritarian control over this board, targeted the CEO of Chicago Public Schools for firing, and when he couldn't get the board to fire that CEO, he decided that he was going to take the resignations of every single school board member.
Now, sources who have spoken to the board members say they are leaving because of what they're calling a relentless pressure campaign from the mayor and CTU to fire Pedro Martinez for cause. Mind you, this is happening as early voting for the next school board elections begin and 3 months before that new 21-member hybrid elected appointed school board takes place. But the mayor today, in a joint statement with the board, is framing today's house cleaning as, quote, a transition to a new board. In a statement saying, quote, with the unprecedented increase in board membership, transitioning new members now will allow them time to orient and gain critical experience prior to welcoming additional elected and appointed members in 2025.
And of course, when he was asked, or when those school board members were asked on whether or not they were going to approve this high interest loan that is incredibly damaging to the city, Brandon Johnson got really angry that anybody dareth question the people who, again, are supposed to negotiate this, and of course played the race card because that's what he always does.
I'm wondering if any of the board members can answer this question. Actually, if all of you can, just maybe even just a show of your hands. How many of you support taking out a
No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not doing that.
For a teacher's contract?
If you have a question for the mayor of Chicago, you can ask me a question. What you are not going to do is litigate what the board has the authority to do once they're appointed. You can ask that once they are appointed. No. I'm not going to do it. It's disrespectful. Do you have a question for me?
Okay, I'm sorry. You brought them up here, and it is a
Do you have a
precedent,
question for me? Ask me the question.
Okay.
Ask me if I support, I'm going to help you out.
Yeah.
Ask me the question if I believe that we should invest in our children and make sure we don't lay off brown and black women. Yes. Yes. I'm not going to tolerate cuts. That's what the issue has been in this city. You know what a better question would be? What are you willing to do with your power to ensure that a school district that stuffed black children in Willis wagons, what you should be asking me is, what are you willing to do where you had a district that have laid off black women? You should be asking me, what am I prepared and willing to do to ensure that our children get the education that they deserve? Anything necessary.
I'm going to ask my own questions. Thank you.
Status quo, the past mistakes that have left our students behind, we're not doing that. And then the so-called exports, the so-called fiscally responsible stewards are making the same argument when our people wanted to be liberated and emancipated in this country. The argument was, you can't free black people because it would be too expensive. They said that it would be fiscally irresponsible for this country to liberate black people. And now you have detractors making the same argument of the Confederacy when it comes to public education in this system.
So Brandon Johnson has already demonstrated that because he is somebody who works for the teachers union, quite literally, they ended up putting him in power, that he will do anything in order to make sure they get paid, even if it's at the expense of the Chicago taxpayers. In fact, he actually proposed a very unpopular property tax increase after promising that he was not going to do so in order to compensate for the fact that he wasn't able to get this high interest short-term loan in order to bribe this constituency, because of course he is there in office in order to pay off his Democratic allies.
The mayor still appoints the majority of the school board. While the mayor's team suggested they were advised there were no ethical concerns, Steve Berlin, the executive director of the City Board of Ethics, denies he was ever asked for advice on the mayor's union status. Berlin tells NBC5, quote, the Board of Ethics was not asked about on-leave arrangements with the CTU or CPS under the city's governmental ethics ordinance and has issued no opinions addressing this issue.
Now look, we all understand that Brandon Johnson is in the pocket of the teachers union. We all understand that he is their puppet and he is there to do their bidding because this is how he's represented himself throughout the whole course of his political career. But the fact of the matter is, he could do a basic thing, at least to nerf some of the appearance of a conflict of interest, by just not being on leave from Chicago Teachers Union, but actually resigning from the position that he holds there. Just doing that, at least on paper, even though we know that it's not actually going to change how he acts in office, would at least nerf the appearance of a conflict of interest, but he's completely unwilling to do so. And of course, he suggests that you're an evil white racist for even hinting that that is a direction that he should go in. But this, of course, is who Brandon Johnson is and has always been, somebody who's in the pocket of the teachers union, who sells out the people, and then when he gets into trouble for it, he says, oh my God, you're an evil white racist. How dare you point out the obvious appearance of a conflict of interest, the obvious conflict of interest that I have, that obviously should not allow me to be the chief negotiator in this, or the people that I appoint to be the chief negotiator in this matter, because I'm actually going to enrich myself by the breakdown of this contract when my ass gets tossed out out of the mayor's office because he never should have been elected there in the first place.
William Quinlan is CPS CEO Pedro Martinez's attorney.
If he is on leave with the Chicago Teachers Union and has a relationship with the Chicago Teachers Union, he's on one side of the table and Chicago Public Schools is on the other.
Now, of course, they bring in the attorney for Pedro Martinez, who was the CEO of Chicago Public Schools, who, despite the fact that he was chosen as the CEO by the board that was appointed by Brandon Johnson, decided last year that he was going to buck Brandon Johnson and not actually take out the high interest loan that Johnson wanted in order to have a fancy giveaway to the Chicago Public School teachers. And this guy took a principled stance. He was asked to resign. Pedro Martinez refused to resign because he knew what was going on, and he ended up losing his entire board because they also refused to do Johnson's bidding to force this individual out, and then the puppets were put in.
So, Mayor, to the outside world, this kind of does look like, because the CTU was your biggest backer, to some it may look like a coup by the CTU to get rid of the board members who would not do your bidding and fire Pedro Martinez. Can you respond to that?
What's the question?
The question is, this looks like a coup by the CTU to get rid of Pedro Martinez. Was there collaboration with the CTU on your part to make this happen so that you could fire Pedro Martinez?
So every single mayor in the history of Chicago has had the authority to appoint board members to multiple boards. Guess who still has that authority? The mayor. This mayor does. Thank you.
And of course, we go up to the situation where they're electing 10 out of the 21 board members through the public, but make no mistake about it, it's still Brandon Johnson's board. It just has more members, more puppets of him, 11, that are always going to outvote the public if the public, actually wanted to do something good for a change and, hold the Chicago Teachers Union accountable for their failures in the Chicago public schools.
Shortly after the mayor took office in June of 2023, Ben Felton, the CPS Chief Talent Officer, said in a memo about the mayor's CTU status, he was, quote, concerned that could be a potential conflict of interest for the mayor to be an employee of an organization that he was overseeing.
Because at the end of the day, what we all want, as good public servants, what anyone wants is the best deal here.
Now, again, it is crazy that the local news has to get all these different statements from all these different organizations. But of course, you have the Chicago Public Schools saying, yeah, obviously, this is a conflict of interest. We are worried about this because he is the employee of the organization that we're currently negotiating with. And he's already gone above and beyond, taken authoritarian control to strip power from people who don't bend over backwards and give them anything that they want. So yeah, Brandon Johnson is clearly scamming right here. This is a very basic, I'm gonna put money in my own pocket later for the bidding of this special interest. And again, it's not even in the way that we normally see where he gets hired as a lobbyist after he's out of office as a reward. He's quite literally going to benefit from the very contract that he's trying to overpay the Chicago teachers on.
David Greising with the Better Government Association.
The question for the mayor is, why do you need to maintain that status? How do you benefit? How does the city benefit?
The Civic Federation's Joe Ferguson also tells us Johnson's status with CTU is a very important question and one that is needed to be clarified.
Look, if you're in American politics, it really does pay if you're a member of the Democratic Party, especially in these solid blue cities that are never going to vote for a Republican, despite the fact that they have that movement to turn Chicago red, because there is no accountability for your actions, even though they are obvious and everybody could see them, instances of corruption. It double pays to be a minority Democrat, because when you do get scrutiny from the media about how bad of a job you're doing, about the obvious corruption that you are going through in your office, you could just shield that by calling everybody evil white racist and talking about how you're just a black man whose job it is to love your black wife and your black children, which, by the way, is quite literally a defense that Brandon Johnson put forward when he was asked about his status as a member of the Chicago Teachers Union. Don't believe me? I have the clip. You know I do.
Can you confirm if you're not, or are you on leave from CTU?
Okay. All right. I'm the mayor of Chicago, you all. I'm the mayor of Chicago. On leave. Let me just look. I'm trying my best to keep composure for these last 15 months, but the fact that we are still trying to litigate stuff that I already beat. Let me just say this one more time. I already won. I am already the mayor of Chicago. Stop talking old news that nobody even cares about. Not one parent has ever asked me that question. Not one Chicagoan has ever asked me that question. Did you know what they have asked me? Will you make sure that the children who are unhoused in this city have an opportunity to lay down their head? That's what they're asking me. Will we have social workers and counselors, Mayor Johnson? My full-time and only job is to run this city, to love my black wife and my black children. Go ahead, Sarah.
Look, this stuff isn't difficult. This stuff isn't complicated. This stuff isn't overconvoluted. This is obvious. This is basic. If you are the mayor of a city and you work for an organization prior to that was actually negotiating against the city for their own best interests, then you should resign from that organization as soon as you come into office as the mayor. The idea that you could just be on leave and then rake in all the money and benefits down the line that you're giving away that is definitely not deserved is absurd, but Brandon Johnson doesn't care about ethics because guess what? He's a black man, and anything that holds him to any kind of standard that you would expect from a white person, that's just evil white racism. And honestly, what you really need to do is shut up with your evil white racism. But of course, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like this video, then show me by leaving a like. You could subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Brandon Johnson, once again screwing over the taxpayers. Till next time.